my daughter called saying, "Mom, we have decided this cruise is really meant for immediate family only. Thanks for understanding." After I would been saving for 2 years and already paid the deposits, so I canceled every reservation while they were boarding. The ship sailed. Their cabin keys didn't work. Have you ever been so generous that people started treating your kindness like an ATM machine? Well, let me tell you about the time my own daughter learned that even the most patient mother has limits, and what happens when you mistake unconditional love for unconditional funding. Drop a heart if you have ever felt taken for granted by family, and stick around because this story will remind you that respect isn't optional, it is earned, and it can be revoked. Listen, Mom. Jessica and I talked it over. This anniversary cruise should really just be our nuclear family. You understand, right? You have been so generous already. Those were the exact words my daughter Emma spoke to me at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon in March. I was standing in my kitchen in Plano, Texas, folding the last batch of travel-sized toiletries I would carefully selected for each family member over the past month. The afternoon sun streamed through my lace curtains, the same ones I would sewn myself 40 years ago when Walter and I first bought this house. The light cast delicate shadows across the granite countertop, where I would arranged 7 small gift bags with the precision of a woman who had spent decades making everyone else's life more comfortable. Each bag contained hand lotion in their preferred scents, lip balm with SPF protection, Dramamine for motion sickness, and a laminated card with the ship's Wi-Fi password that I would researched for weeks to make sure everyone could stay connected to work and friends back home. My reading glasses hung from the beaded chain Emma had given me for Mother's Day 3 years ago. Back when she still remembered, I existed beyond the services I provided. The chain caught the light as I bent over the small bottles, each one representing hours of research into which brands were best for sensitive skin, which formulas worked in humid climates, which packaging would survive the rigors of cruise ship activities. I set down the tiny bottle of anti-nausea medication I would been wrapping for my youngest grandson, Tommy. He got seasick on the ferry to Galveston last summer when we took a day trip to the island. I remembered because I was the one who held his head while he threw up over the railing, stroking his sweaty hair and singing the same lullaby I would sung to Emma when she was his age. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, had been too busy taking selfies with the sunset to notice her son's distress. "What do you mean by nuclear family?" I asked quietly, though my heart already knew the answer. My voice barely carried over the hum of the dishwasher I would started, before she called, loaded with the good china I would used for Sunday dinner the previous weekend when they would all come over and eaten my pot roast, while Jessica complained that it was too salty and the potatoes weren't crispy enough. There was a pause on the line. I could hear voices in the background, Jessica's laugh that always sounded like breaking glass to my ears, the kids asking about ice cream and being told to wait until after dinner. Normal family sounds from which I was apparently being surgically removed with the clinical precision of a cancerous tumor. You know, just me and Jessica and the kids. Her parents too, of course. Since they are technically grandparents, it is really about keeping the group manageable, more intimate. Emma's voice had that artificially bright tone she would developed over the past few years. The one she used when she was trying to convince herself she wasn't being cruel while simultaneously delivering cruelty with surgical precision. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stared at the coffee maker where I would program 7 different wake-up times to accommodate everyone's preferences. Early coffee for Jessica's mother, Eleanor, who liked to watch the sunrise from her balcony with her daily devotional. Decaf for her father Robert's heart condition that he managed with pills and dietary restrictions. Extra strong French roast for Emma, who never got enough sleep, juggling her job at the marketing firm, with 2 active children and a husband who traveled for work. I would spend 2 weeks researching the ship's coffee service, learning their brands and preparation methods, even calling the cruise line to ask if I could bring my own coffee pods to ensure everyone's morning routine would remain comfortable and familiar, even in an unfamiliar environment. "Mom, you there?" Somewhere between confusion and that hollow ache that starts in your chest and spreads outward like spilled wine on white fabric, staining everything it touches with permanent discoloration. Great. So we are all set, then. The cruise leaves Saturday morning from Miami. Jessica's coordinating the final details, since she is better with that kind of organization stuff. I wanted to remind her that I would been the one coordinating details for 34 years. Birthday parties where I hand-stitched themed decorations because store-bought wasn't personal enough. Christmas mornings, where I started cooking at 4 a.m. so everyone could have their favorite breakfast casserole still warm from the oven. School pickup schedules I managed when both Emma and Jessica worked late, driving across town in rush-hour traffic to collect children who weren't even biologically mine, but whom I loved as fiercely as if they were. I wanted to remind her about the time I drove 8 hours through a snowstorm to help when Tommy had pneumonia and Jessica was overwhelmed. Or the weekend I spent painting their nursery when Lily was born because Jessica's morning sickness was so severe she couldn't tolerate the paint fumes. Or the countless nights I babysat so they could have date nights, never charging for my time, never complaining when they came home 3 hours later than promised. But the words stuck in my throat, like cotton balls soaked in regret. "I have already paid for everything," I said instead, my voice smaller than I intended. "Oh right, yes, thank you so much for that. Really, Mom, we know it was expensive. That is exactly why we want you to just relax at home. You have done your part, done my part." Like I was a hired service that had completed its function and could now be politely dismissed with a thank you and a pat on the head. Like the thousands of dollars I would saved, scrimping and working extra hours and denying myself small pleasures, was payment for the privilege of being excluded from the experience I would made possible. After she hung up, I stood in my kitchen for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The house settled around me with the familiar creaks and sighs of a home that had witnessed decades of life, love, loss, and now betrayal. The refrigerator hummed its eternal song. The clock on the wall ticked away seconds that felt like small deaths. The gift bags looked ridiculous now, sitting on my counter like evidence of my own foolishness. 7 little packages for 6 people, with 1 extra for the grandmother who had been voted off the island without even knowing she was being considered for elimination. That evening, after I would put away the travel toiletries and folded the vacation clothes I would bought specifically for this trip, I called my sister Dorothy in Austin. She would always been the practical one between us, the one who told me uncomfortable truths with the bluntness of someone who would rather hurt your feelings than watch you hurt yourself. "They uninvited you?" Dorothy's voice pitched high with disbelief that echoed through her ranch-style home where she lived alone with 3 cats and a garden that required more attention than most people. "After you paid for the whole damn thing." Apparently, it is about group dynamics. Keeping things intimate. Intimate, my ass. It is about that daughter-in-law of yours finally getting what she has wanted since she married Emma. You out of the picture completely. I would known Dorothy would say that. She would been saying it in various forms for the past 8 years, ever since Jessica joined our family, with her opinions about everything from my cooking to my furniture to my parenting style that had somehow managed to produce the accomplished, loving woman Jessica fell in love with. Dorothy had never liked Jessica, thought she was entitled and manipulative, but I would dismiss my sister's concerns as jealousy or misunderstanding. "Maybe she is right though," I said, surprising myself with the words. "Maybe I have been too involved. Maybe I do crowd them." Eleanor Marie Patterson. "Don't you dare start that nonsense. You raised a good daughter. You have been nothing but supportive of their marriage, even when that woman treated you like hired help. You babysit those kids every Friday night so they can have date nights. You brought them groceries during COVID when they were both sick and couldn't leave the house. You drove 6 hours when Tommy broke his arm because Jessica was too panicked to handle the emergency room." Dorothy was right, of course. But being right doesn't protect you from being erased. Being right doesn't warm you when you are sitting alone in a house that once echoed with children's laughter and now only echoes with your own footsteps. I would been planning this cruise for 2 years, not just saving money, working 20 extra hours a week at the dental office downtown, but researching every detail with the obsessive thoroughness of a woman who wanted everything to be perfect. I would call the cruise line 17 times to make sure the cabins were close together but not too close. I would arrange for connecting rooms for the kids, but separate space for the adults so everyone could have privacy when they needed it. I would even paid extra for the specialty dining package, so we could have one fancy dinner where everyone dressed up and I could take professional photos of the whole family. The photos I would been imagining for months, all of us around a table with candlelight and ocean views stretching to infinity. Emma, in the blue dress, I would helped her pick out during a rare shopping trip where she would actually seemed to enjoy my company. Jessica actually smiling at me, instead of around me or through me. The kids with their hair combed and their faces clean, their eyes bright with the joy that comes from new experiences shared with people who love them. 3 generations celebrating Emma and Jessica's 10th anniversary, acknowledging the love that had created the family I would thought I was part of. But there would be no photos of me. There would be no me. The realization hit like a physical blow, doubling me over the kitchen sink where I would wash 10,000 dishes for family gatherings they now had without me. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white against the dark granite, and let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. I opened my laptop with hands that trembled slightly, age spots more prominent in the glow of the screen. The cruise fund sat in my banking account like a monument to my own naivety, $18,347.62. Every dollar earned from the part-time bookkeeping job I would taken specifically to afford this trip. I would been working 20 hours a week at Dr. Hendrick's dental office, tracking appointments and managing insurance claims with fingers that cramped every evening from typing. The work was tedious, the pay modest. But I would told myself it was worth it for this moment that would never come. I would given up my Saturday morning coffee dates with friends to work weekend shifts. I would canceled my cable to save $50 a month. I would bought generic groceries and skipped my monthly visits to the salon where I would been getting my hair done for 15 years. Every sacrifice had been made cheerfully, willingly, because I was building towards something beautiful. A memory that would last longer than any of us, a week where we could all focus on loving each other without the distractions of daily life. I clicked through to the reservation system, each page loading slowly on my older laptop. Carnival Cruise Lines. 7-day Caribbean itinerary, leaving Miami the 15th of March. 4 cabins booked under my name and credit card. 7 passengers registered, with me listed as the primary contact and account holder for everything from dinner reservations to emergency contacts. The departure date was 3 days away. 3 days for them to realize what they would done and call to apologize. 3 days for Emma to remember who had raised her and come to her senses. 3 days for Jessica to develop a conscience. But I already knew none of that would happen. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was calculated exclusion, carefully planned and executed with the kind of precision that comes from long consideration. I stared at the screen for a long time, cursor blinking in the white space where I could type a cancellation request. It would be so easy. Type a few words. Click submit. Watch 2 years of dreams dissolve into refund processing that would take weeks to complete. But I didn't do it. Not yet. Instead, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea with honey from the jar Walter had bought at a farmer's market 6 months before he died. The honey was nearly gone now, crystallized around the edges, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Some things are too precious to discard, even when they are no longer fresh. I sat in the recliner that faced my backyard, the one Walter had called Eleanor's thinking chair, because I retreated there whenever I needed to process difficult emotions or make important decisions. The azaleas were blooming pink and white clusters that Walter had planted before he died, tiny saplings that I would never expected to survive the harsh Texas summers and unpredictable winter freezes. He would never live to see them reach full height, but I would tended them for 15 years, pruning and fertilizing and protecting them through ice storms and droughts and heat waves that killed weaker plants. They were magnificent now, a testament to persistence and proper care, proof that some things become more beautiful with time when they are valued and nurtured. I thought about what Walter would say if he were here. He would always been direct about people who took advantage of kindness, having grown up poor in East Texas where generosity was a luxury, and reciprocity was a survival skill. "Ellie," he would say, in that gentle but firm way of his, the voice that could calm crying babies and stubborn mules with equal effectiveness. "You cannot keep watering seeds that were never planted in good soil." Jessica had never been planted in good soil where I was concerned. From the very beginning, she would see me as competition rather than support, as an obstacle to overcome rather than a resource to cherish. When Emma brought her home for the first time 8 years ago, nervous and excited about introducing the woman she loved, I would make Jessica's favorite meal after calling her mother to ask what she enjoyed eating. Instead of appreciation, I got corrections delivered with smiles that didn't reach her eyes. The chicken was too dry. The seasoning was too mild. The vegetables were overcooked. The wine was the wrong vintage for the menu. Each criticism delivered as helpful feedback, as if I were a caterer who needed professional development rather than a mother trying to welcome her daughter's partner into our family. I tried harder after that, determined to win over this woman who had captured my daughter's heart. I bought Jessica flowers for her birthday, researching her favorite varieties and spending more than I could afford on an arrangement from the expensive florist across town. She was allergic to lilies. The flowers gave her a headache that lasted 3 days, and she made sure everyone knew it was my fault. I offered to help plan their wedding, imagining mother, daughter bonding over cake tastings and dress fittings. She already had a wedding planner, someone more sophisticated than a small-town mother could ever be. My suggestions were gently dismissed, my offers politely declined, my presence tolerated but not desired. I suggested we go shopping together for baby clothes when they were expecting Tommy. Excited about becoming a grandmother and hoping shared anticipation might bridge the gap between us. She preferred to shop with her own mother, someone who understood her aesthetic and wouldn't embarrass her in upscale boutiques. Every gesture was deflected, every offer politely refused, every attempt at connection met with a wall disguised as preference. And Emma, caught between us like a child of divorce, chose peace over truth. It was easier to ask me to step back than to ask Jessica to step forward. It was simpler to manage my expectations than to address Jessica's coldness. So I stepped back, and back, and back, until I was standing so far outside their circle that when they finally decided to close it completely, nobody noticed the space where I used to be. Except me. I noticed everything. The tea grew cold in my hands as I made a decision that surprised me with its clarity. I was not going to cancel the cruise and let them off the hook for their cruelty, but I was not going to let them use my money to exclude me either. I returned to my laptop and opened a new browser window. Instead of cancellation, I searched for change cruise reservation names. The policies were complicated but doable. Primary account holder could modify passenger lists up to 48 hours before departure with proper documentation and change fees. It would cost me $600 in modification fees, but I had $600. What I didn't have was tolerance for funding my own erasure, for paying thousands of dollars to be treated like a discarded service provider. I made a list of names in my spiral notebook, the same one where I tracked my grocery expenses and recorded my grandchildren's growth measurements every time they visited. But this list was different. These were women like me, women who had been overlooked, undervalued, forgotten by the families they would built with their own hands and hearts. Rose Martinez from my church, whose son moved to California 15 years ago and called twice a year, always when he needed money or advice, but never just to check on his mother's well-being. Margaret Chen from the grocery store, where I shopped every Tuesday, who worked 40 hours a week at 72 because her retirement savings had been stolen by her late husband's business partner in a scheme that left her with nothing but a mortgage and broken trust. Sandra Williams from Book Club, who had raised 4 children as a single mother after her husband left her for his secretary, working 2 jobs and going to night school to become a nurse, only to discover that none of her successful children could find time to visit for holidays because they were too busy with their own families. Betty Richardson, my next-door neighbor for 20 years, who had been caregiving for her sister with dementia for 6 years without a single day off. watching the woman who would taught her to braid hair and bake cookies slowly disappear into a confusion that left Betty feeling like she was mourning someone who was still alive. Helen Garcia, from the community center where I volunteered, who taught free ESL classes and had never been anywhere except Texas and Oklahoma in her 78 years because every penny she would ever earned went to supporting children and grandchildren who took her sacrifices for granted. And Patricia Johnson, who had been my best friend since we were 25 and working as teachers in the same elementary school, sharing classroom supplies and playground duty and dreams about the families we would build someday. Pat, who had lost her husband to cancer the same year I lost Walter, and who understood exactly what it felt like to be invisible to the people you love most. 6 women. 6 forgotten women. 6 women who deserved to see the Caribbean more than people who had forgotten what appreciation looked like. I called Rose first, my fingers trembling slightly as I dialed her number from memory. Her voice was tired when she answered, like it always was these days. She would been watching her grandson Marcus after school while her daughter worked double shifts at the hospital. Even though Rose's own knees were shot from 40 years of standing on concrete floors at the factory, and she could barely climb stairs without wincing. A cruise? Her voice lifted with disbelief that echoed through her small apartment where she lived on Social Security and the occasional check from Marcus's mother. Eleanor, what are you talking about? I am talking about 7 days of room service and no dishes to wash. 7 days of someone else making the beds and asking what we want for dinner, instead of us figuring out how to stretch ground beef for another meal. 7 days of sitting by a pool with books and drinks, with little umbrellas and no one asking us to babysit or cook or clean or solve problems that aren't ours to solve. But the cost, her voice dropped to a whisper, the automatic response of someone who would learn to decline invitations before hearing the details because accepting meant hardship she couldn't afford. Already paid for. Lock, stock, and barrel. I just need to know if you can get time off from watching Marcus. There was a long pause filled with the sound of Rose's breathing and a television playing in the background. Probably the evening news she watched religiously, even though it mostly brought her sadness and worry about a world that seemed to be getting more dangerous every day. Then Rose started crying. Not sad crying, but the kind of tears that come when someone offers you something you thought you would stopped hoping for. The kind of emotion that surprises you with its intensity because you didn't realize how much you had been holding back. When is the last time someone offered to take you somewhere? Rose, I cannot remember. Her voice broke on the words, admitting a loneliness so profound it had become part of her identity. Then, pack a bag. Honey, we leave Saturday. I made 5 more calls that night, each conversation following the same pattern. Disbelief, followed by tears, followed by questions about why they deserved such kindness, as if kindness required justification, as if a lifetime of caring for others wasn't qualification enough for 1 week of being cared for in return. Margaret cried because no one had invited her anywhere since her husband died 3 years ago. Sandra cried because she couldn't remember the last time someone had spent money on her comfort instead of her utility. Betty cried because she hadn't been farther than Dallas in a decade, and that trip had been for her sister's medical consultation, not pleasure. Helen cried in Spanish and English, switching between languages as emotion overwhelmed her capacity for translation. Each woman expressed the same amazement. Someone remembered they existed. Someone thought they were worth celebrating. Someone valued their company enough to invest thousands of dollars in their happiness. Patricia was the last call. She answered on the first ring, like she always did, as if she had been waiting by the phone for someone to remember she existed in a world that seemed designed to overlook women like us. Ellie, it is late. Everything okay? Everything's perfect. How fast can you pack for a Caribbean cruise? What cruise? Whose cruise? Ours? Mine. I have 7 spots and 6 friends who have never been treated like queens. Interested. Pat was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she whispered, "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. We sail Saturday from Miami." "But what about Emma's anniversary cruise?" I had told Pat about the trip months ago. shared my excitement about finally having a family vacation where everyone was included, where 3 generations could create memories that would last long after I was gone. I would even shown her the photos I would printed of the ship, the islands we would visit, the restaurants where we would eat, planning our conversations like a teenager, planning her first date. Change of plans. Emma decided I wasn't invited after all. She what? Pat's voice carried the outrage I hadn't allowed myself to feel, the righteous anger that comes from watching someone you love being mistreated. Nuclear family only, more intimate without me there. Apparently. That little. Pat caught herself before finishing the curse. But I heard it anyway, and appreciated the sentiment more than she could know. So now, it is our cruise. No ungrateful children, no entitled in-laws, no one taking photos around us instead of with us. Just friends who know how to say thank you. I haven't been on a vacation in 12 years, Ellie, I know. Neither have any of us. That is exactly why we are going. Friday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of Texas spring day that makes you remember why people choose to live where the weather can kill you 3 months of the year. I drove to the cruise line office in Dallas, navigating Friday morning traffic with the determination of a woman on a mission. The customer service representative, a young woman named Ashley, with bright pink nails and infinite patience, helped me transfer all 7 bookings to new names. It cost $642 in change fees, plus $200 for expedited documentation processing. But Ashley treated the whole thing like an adventure rather than a crisis. So you are taking your friends instead of your family, she asked, while typing our new information into her computer. Her nails clicking against the keys like tiny musical notes. My friends are my family. I just forgot that for a while. She printed our new boarding passes and travel documents, each set tucked into a bright blue folder with cruise line logos and tropical graphics that promised escape from whatever troubles waited at home. 7 folders for 7 women who were about to remember what it felt like to be celebrated instead of tolerated. Ashley smiled as she handed over the paperwork. This sounds like the best kind of girls' trip. You ladies are going to have such a wonderful time, we intend to, I replied, meaning every word. That afternoon, I received a text from Emma while I was organizing our travel documents at my kitchen table. Hi Mom, just confirming everything's set for tomorrow. Jessica's parents are driving down to Miami tonight, and we are flying out early morning. Thanks again for making this possible. I stared at the message for several minutes, reading it over and over until the words lost their meaning and became just shapes on a screen. She still had no idea I knew I wasn't included. She thought I was sitting at home, contentedly funding their vacation, while believing I was somehow part of it through financial contribution. The casual tone of the message, the exclamation point at the end, the assumption that gratitude expressed via text message was sufficient payment for thousands of dollars and 2 years of planning it crystallized everything that was wrong with our relationship. I typed back, "Hope you have the trip you deserve." It wasn't a lie. I genuinely hoped they got exactly what they deserved, which was about to be very different from what they expected. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp sunshine that makes everything feel possible. The air clear and bright, with that particular quality of light that comes before the Texas heat settles in for another brutal summer. I would barely slept, but not from anxiety, from excitement. The kind of anticipation I hadn't felt since I was a child waiting for Christmas morning, when every present under the tree held infinite possibility. My suitcase sat by the front door, packed with sundresses I would bought specifically for this trip, a new swimsuit that made me feel brave instead of self-conscious, and the jewelry Walter had given me for our 25th anniversary. I would never worn those pearls anywhere special because I would been saving them for a special occasion, apparently waiting for the right people to celebrate with. At 7 a.m., I loaded my car and drove to Patricia's house across town. She was waiting on her front porch with a suitcase covered in travel stickers from trips she would taken with her late husband 30 years ago, back when they were young and adventurous and thought they had forever to explore the world together. "I cannot believe we are doing this," she said. settling into my passenger seat with the careful movements of someone whose joints protested sudden changes in routine. Believe it, we are picking up Rose next, then Margaret. Then we are driving to Austin to collect Helen and Sandra. Betty's meeting us at the airport, and Emma still doesn't know. Emma thinks she is getting a free cruise for her nuclear family. She will find out the truth when they try to board, and their names aren't on the list. Pat whistled low, a sound of admiration mixed with disbelief. Remind me never to cross you, Eleanor Patterson. Just remember to appreciate me, and we will be fine. The drive to Miami took 2 days, longer than flying but infinitely more enjoyable. We stopped overnight in Houston, sharing rooms at a hotel near the airport, staying up too late talking and laughing, like teenagers at a sleepover. Margaret told stories about the customers at the grocery store, the ones who paid with food stamps and tried to hide their embarrassment, the ones who bought expensive steaks with cash while their children wore shoes with holes. Sandra shared gossip from book club, the small dramas and large heartbreaks that unfold when women gather to discuss stories and end up sharing their own. Helen taught us Spanish phrases we would need for the islands, patient with our pronunciation and delighted by our enthusiasm. These women had decades of stories I would never heard, dreams they would never shared, humor that had been buried under years of taking care of everyone else. Listening to them, I realized I would spend so much energy trying to force my way into Emma's world that I would forgotten about the world I already belonged to. Sunday morning, we flew from Houston to Miami, 7 women with matching bright blue cruise folders, chattering with excitement as we boarded the plane. The flight attendant, a woman about my age with kind eyes and a warm smile, noticed our folders and asked if we were celebrating something special. "We are celebrating friendship," Rose answered, her voice stronger than I would heard it in years, "and second chances. And proving that the best family is the one you choose," added Betty, surprising us all with her eloquence. The attendant smiled and brought us champagne without being asked, small bottles of the good stuff that usually cost extra. "To chosen family," she said, raising her own small bottle of water in toast. We clinked our plastic cups together over the hum of jet engines, 6 women and 1 grandmother who would finally learn the difference between being wanted and being used. At Miami International, we collected our luggage and took a taxi convoy to the port. 3 cars filled with women who had forgotten what it felt like to be passengers instead of drivers, to be taken care of instead of doing all the caring. The ship was massive, gleaming white against the impossibly blue sky, with balconies stacked like building blocks and flags snapping in the ocean breeze. I would seen pictures online, studied deck plans and cabin layouts, but the reality was breathtaking in a way that photos couldn't capture. As we approached the check-in area, wheeling our luggage across pavement that sparkled in the Florida sunshine, I spotted them. Emma, Jessica, and Jessica's parents standing in line about 50 feet ahead of us. The kids were running around their luggage pile, excited and impatient in the way children get when adventure is close enough to taste. Emma kept checking her phone, probably texting me updates I would never receive about their smooth travel and mounting excitement. Jessica wore the new sundress I would seen her post on social media, the one that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Her parents looked relaxed and prosperous, the kind of people who expected good things to happen to them because good things usually did. They looked happy, confident. Like people who would never questioned whether they deserved to be there, who would never spent 2 years saving for a dream that others would benefit from. Like people who took generosity for granted because it had always been available to them. I guided my group to a different check-in line, farther away but with a clear view. I wanted to see their faces when they learned the truth, when the consequences of their choices became real instead of theoretical. It didn't take long. I watched Emma hand over their boarding documents to a customer service agent with the casual confidence of someone who would never been denied anything she wanted. I saw the agent's confused expression as she typed information into her computer, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. I saw her call over a supervisor, a woman in a navy blazer who looked at the documents with the same confusion. I saw the supervisor shake her head and point to a different line, the one reserved for passengers with booking problems, the line nobody wants to find themselves in when departure time is approaching. Emma's face changed from confident to puzzled, to worried to panicked, in about 30 seconds, her expression cycling through emotions like a slot machine, landing on increasingly bad outcomes. I watched her pull out her phone, probably trying to call me to fix whatever technical glitch was preventing their boarding. I watched Jessica's face turn red as she gestured at the boarding passes in her hand, waving them like evidence in a trial where she was both prosecutor and victim. I watched Jessica's parents exchange looks of alarm, their vacation confidence beginning to crack around the edges. They spent 20 minutes in the problem resolution line, voices rising as their situation became clear to them, but not solvable by customer service representatives who could only tell them what the computer screen revealed. Their names were not in the system. Emma broke away from the group and called me directly. My phone buzzed with her ringtone, the same melody I would programmed years ago when she still answered my calls with enthusiasm instead of obligation. I declined the call, my fingers steady on the screen. She called again immediately, declined again. Text messages started arriving in rapid succession, each one more desperate than the last. Mom, call me now, there is a problem with our boarding passes. They are saying our names aren't in the system. Where are you? We need to fix this, the ship leaves in 2 hours. Mom, please, answer your phone, something's wrong with the reservation system. Call me back right now. I turned my phone to silent and handed our documentation to the check. In agent, a cheerful young man who processed our boarding with the efficiency of someone dealing with a routine transaction instead of a life-changing moment. Our process was smooth and efficient. 7 boarding passes printed without a single complication. 7 cabin keycards activated with magnetic strips that would unlock doors to rooms I would paid for, but never expected to enjoy myself. 7. Welcome aboard smiles from staff, who treated us like valued customers instead of necessary inconveniences. Will you be needing any assistance with boarding? Ladies, the agent asked, clearly trained to offer extra help to groups of older passengers. We have got it handled, I replied, surprised by the strength in my own voice. We are very good at taking care of ourselves. As we walked toward the ship's entrance, our blue folders clutched in hands that shook slightly with excitement and anticipation. I heard Emma's voice behind us, raised in frustration as she argued with the supervisor who could only repeat what the computer told her. The reservation had been canceled and rebooked under different names. The kids were crying now, confused about why they weren't getting on the boat like they would been promised. Tommy kept asking why they couldn't just buy new tickets, his 7-year-old logic unable to comprehend why money couldn't solve this problem the way it solved most problems in his young life. Jessica was on her phone, probably calling her credit card company to report fraud, her voice sharp with the entitlement of someone who would never been denied something she felt she deserved. I didn't turn around. I didn't feel guilty. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of consequences, finally finding the people who would earn them through their own choices and actions. Our cabins were on deck 8, with ocean view balconies and enough space for all of us to gather comfortably without feeling crowded. As the ship prepared for departure, we stood on Patricia's balcony and watched the port of Miami grow smaller, the city skyline shrinking until it looked like a postcard of someone else's life. Somewhere down there, Emma and Jessica were probably still trying to understand how their free vacation had evaporated, how the generous mother they would dismissed had somehow disappeared along with the funding they would taken for granted. Do you think they will figure it out? Margaret asked, her voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than malice. Eventually, but it will not matter by then. We will be halfway to Cozumel, and they will be driving back to Texas with a very expensive lesson about appreciation and consequences. That first night, we ate dinner in the main dining room at a table for 8. The empty chair a reminder of the friend who couldn't join us but who was with us in spirit. I would brought a framed photograph of Walter, just like I would plan to do with my family, but this was better. These women asked about the picture, wanted to hear stories about our marriage, shared memories of their own husbands and partners and children, who had forgotten to call. No one rolled their eyes when I talked too long about Walter's habit of leaving me little notes in my lunchbox. No one changed the subject when I mentioned missing his laugh or the way he sang off key in the shower. No one made me feel like my grief was inconvenient or my memories were boring. After dinner, we went to the deck and watched the sunset paint the ocean in shades of orange and gold that seemed impossible, like someone had spilled molten metal across the water. Helen had never seen water that blue, so vast it seemed to curve away into infinity. Sandra had never been on a boat bigger than a fishing vessel, and she stood at the railing with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by beauty she would never imagined existed. Margaret kept taking pictures with a disposable camera because she didn't trust digital technology, determined to have physical proof that this experience had actually happened to someone like her. "This is what happiness feels like," Betty said quietly, as we stood at the railing, salt air whipping our hair into tangles we didn't care about. "I would forgotten," Rose replied, her voice wondering. "I never knew," whispered Helen, switching to Spanish as emotion overcame her English vocabulary. For 7 days, we were tourists in our own lives, exploring places we would only seen in magazines and experiencing luxuries we would never thought we deserved. We explored ancient Mayan ruins in Mexico, walking carefully over stones laid by hands that had been dust for centuries. We swam with dolphins in Jamaica, gentle creatures that seemed to understand we needed healing more than entertainment. We shopped for souvenirs in Grand Cayman, buying trinkets for grandchildren and friends back home, finally understanding why people said it was better to give than receive when you were giving from abundance rather than sacrifice. Most importantly, we celebrated each other. Every meal began with someone saying something they appreciated about another person at the table. Every evening ended with sharing one thing that had made us feel grateful that day, a practice that revealed how many small joys we would been overlooking in our daily lives. On the last night, I stood on my balcony looking out at the ocean that stretched endless and dark toward home, toward a life that would never be the same because I would never be the same. My phone had dozens of missed calls and text messages from Emma, but I would read only the first few before deciding I would heard enough. The messages followed a predictable pattern: anger, then confusion, then hurt, then anger again, then attempts at bargaining, then guilt, then more anger. But nowhere in any of them was the word sorry. Nowhere was acknowledgement of what they would done or understanding of why I would responded as I had. Only outrage at the consequences of their own choices. That told me everything I needed to know about whether I would made the right decision. Patricia joined me on the balcony with 2 glasses of wine, the good stuff from the captain's reserve that we would been saving for our last night. "Regrets?" she asked, settling into the chair beside mine. "None," I answered, and meant it completely. Only that we waited so long to do this for ourselves. "What will you tell Emma when you get home?" "Nothing. I am done explaining myself to people who don't listen anyway. She will probably come over, demand an explanation. She can demand whatever she wants. I am not available for that conversation anymore." We sailed into Port of Miami on Sunday morning. 7 women tanned and relaxed and fundamentally changed by a week of being valued instead of used. As we gathered our luggage and prepared to disembark, each woman hugged me with tears in their eyes, but they were good tears, grateful tears, tears that came from being seen and appreciated. "You saved my life," Margaret whispered, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "You reminded me I matter," Sandra said, her usual stoicism cracking to reveal the vulnerable woman underneath. "You showed me what real friendship looks like," Helen added, mixing English and Spanish in her emotional state. "But they had it backwards. They would saved me. They would reminded me that being forgotten by some people just means you are free to be found by the right ones, that love withheld by those who should give it freely can be found in abundance from those who understand its value." The flight home was bittersweet. We were sad to end our adventure, but excited to return with proof that we were capable of joy, that we deserved celebration, that we were enough exactly as we were, without modification or improvement. When I walked into my house Sunday evening, it felt different, lighter somehow, as if the weight of other people's expectations had been physically removed from the walls and ceiling. The gift bags I would prepared were still on the kitchen counter, but instead of looking pathetic, they looked like evidence of my own generosity. Proof that I was someone worth knowing and celebrating. Emma called Monday morning. I let it go to voicemail, her voice tight with anger and confusion as she demanded explanations. I wasn't obligated to provide. Tuesday she called again. Voicemail again, this time with Jessica in the background, adding her own commentary about betrayal and family obligations. Wednesday she showed up at my door, and I watched her through the window for several minutes before deciding whether to answer. She looked tired, older somehow, like someone who would spent a week learning that actions have consequences, and entitlement has limits, that the world doesn't always bend to accommodate your preferences. I opened the door but didn't invite her in, my body language making it clear this wasn't a social visit that would involve coffee and small talk. "We need to talk," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been refused. "Do we? You ruined our vacation. You embarrassed us in front of Jessica's parents. You cost us thousands of dollars in rebooking fees and hotel stays and flights home." "I didn't cost you anything. I simply stopped paying for my own exclusion. You knew what I meant when I said nuclear family. I knew exactly what you meant. That is why I acted accordingly." She stared at me like I was a stranger, someone she would never met before. In a way, I was. I was no longer the mother who begged for crumbs of attention and felt grateful when they were thrown my way. I was no longer the grandmother who accepted being erased from photos and excluded from plans because maintaining family peace was more important than maintaining family respect. I was someone who knew her worth and demanded it be recognized. Someone who understood that love without respect is just manipulation wearing a prettier name. "Jessica's really upset," Emma said, as if Jessica's emotional state was supposed to motivate me to apologize for defending myself. "Jessica doesn't like me anyway. Now she has a reason that doesn't require her to pretend otherwise." "That is not true. Emma, your wife has spent 8 years trying to minimize my role in your life." She finally succeeded. "I just decided to fund it differently. You cannot just cut us off. We are your family." I smiled at that. The irony sharp enough to cut glass. "You are right. You are my family. And family shows up for each other. Family includes each other. Family doesn't take money with one hand and push away with the other. So what? You are punishing us. I am not punishing anyone. I am just not participating in my own erasure anymore. The kids miss you." That one hit harder than all the rest combined, but I held steady against the emotional manipulation. "Then bring them by. Let them call me. Include me in their lives. But don't use them as leverage to make me forget what you did." She stood there for another minute, waiting for me to break, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness for asserting my worth and demanding basic respect. When it became clear that wasn't happening, when she realized I was no longer available to fund experiences I wasn't invited to enjoy, she turned and walked back to her car with the stiff movements of someone who had never learned how to lose gracefully. I closed the door and made myself a cup of tea with honey from a new jar, fresh and golden and sweet. Then I opened my laptop and started planning the next trip, because now I knew something I would forgotten. The best adventures happen when you travel with people who actually want you there. 3 months later, I received an invitation in the mail, heavy cardstock with elegant script announcing that Emma and Jessica were renewing their wedding vows for their 10th anniversary. The ceremony would be small, immediate family only, held at Jessica's parents' country club, with a reception following. I laughed out loud when I read it, the sound echoing through my house like music I would been waiting to hear. Then I called Patricia. "Want to go to Tuscany?" I asked without preamble. "When?" "The same weekend Emma's having her vow renewal. I figure if I am not immediate family anymore, I am free to make other plans." "Book it," Pat said, without hesitation. "I have always wanted to see Italy." I hung up and opened my laptop, fingers steady as I began researching flights and hotels and tours of vineyards where grapes had been growing longer than my family had been disappointing me. This time, I wasn't planning a vacation, hoping to be appreciated. I was planning an adventure, because I already knew I was loved. The azaleas in my backyard bloomed again, that spring bigger and more beautiful than ever. Their pink and white clusters attracting butterflies and bees who understood that some flowers are worth the effort of seeking out. I sat among them with my morning coffee, watching birds build nests and feeling grateful for the kind of roots that grow deeper when they are properly tended. My phone buzzed with a text from Rose. "Thank you again for the best week of my life. When is our next adventure?" I smiled and typed back, "Where haven't we been yet?" Because that is what happens when you stop watering seeds planted in bad soil. You discover how much beauty was waiting to grow in good ground all along, how much love was available from people who understood its value. If this story reminds you of your own journey from forgotten to found, if you have ever had to choose between being used and being valued, if you have learned that the family you choose can be stronger than the family you are born into, then you belong here with her light. This is where we tell the stories of women who stopped asking for respect and started commanding it. Women who discovered that being excluded from the wrong table means you are free to find the right one. We share the truth about love that costs everything and gives nothing back, and about friendship that asks for nothing and gives everything freely. So if you believe that wisdom comes from walking away from what hurts you, if you know that peace lives on the other side of boundaries, if you understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling someone's selfishness, then subscribe to her light today. Because when women stop dimming themselves for others, they don't disappear. They illuminate everything around them. Drop a heart if this story made you think about your own worth. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between funding your own exclusion or standing up for yourself? Because your story matters too, and her light is where forgotten women become unforgettable.